Welcome in, CAA football fans. Bobby Broyles here along with Tim McDonald as we begin our 12 teams in 12 days series. And Tim, today we start with a look at Elon. The Phoenix had some growing pains in their first season in CAA football. While they didn't pick up a conference win, on the positive side, the program does have a year under its belt and knows what to expect in year two.
I think you can expect a lot of adjustments. This is year two. We know Coach Skrosky. We know what type of guy he is and what he wants to install at Elon. Like you said, it's a transition experience. You're not going to come into the league right away and just win a handful of conference games. One of their non-conference wins last year, that unfortunately against Charlotte, that was the only win they came away with. Again, it's a week-to-week grind in CAA football, and that's something we talked about a year ago when we did the preview for Elon. Coming into CAA football, Bob, we talked about some of the changes. They're going to new venues. They're playing new teams. That's something that's all going to become familiar. At times we saw Elon struggle, but at times we saw them also play well. We saw them play well versus Delaware. We saw them play well versus Maine. There's times at times when this team got it together towards the end of the year, you can see they're starting to figure it out. I think that's something we've seen with Stony Brook, we've seen with Albany too. Look at Stony Brook, 3-5 in their first year to 4-4 last year. They made strides. Albany, 0-8 in their first year to 3-5 this past year. We can both agree both those teams made adjustments. Now, it's not going to be the same with Elon. We're not saying that's going to happen right away, but I think they're going in the right direction.
Absolutely. We had a chance to speak with Coach Skrosky at CAA Football Media Day, and this is what he had to say about year two in the league.
I think it's in the whole culture. I think you go through that first year, and in any first-year project, you have a feeling of you're assessing in so many ways. You're assessing what is the best way to recruit, where are the best areas to recruit, what are our best messages in the recruiting process, and then internally, what is the expectation in summer workouts? What is the expectation in spring workouts? So I think the improvements, and somebody asked me earlier today, how do you measure success when you're coming off a one-win season? Well, that success is in a daily process. And, so many coaches use that term, the process. I truly believe in that. My strength coach yesterday sent me some before and after pictures. Our guys are going to end their summer workout program tomorrow. And he had about 5 year-ago pictures and then pictures that were just taken. And when you see these kids and the way they've developed physically, you're making progress. You're doing the right things day in and day out. And, the bottom line is where and when will that reflect on the field, because certainly that's the way we're measured, with wins and losses. And, hopefully all that hard work we've been going through this whole offseason is going to pay off on the field as we head into the season.
The defense, Tim, played well in those close losses last year. In particular, safety Chris Blair, who came over with Coach Skrosky from Ball State. He made the CAA football preseason defensive team as a sophomore.
Yeah, Chris Blair was one of the bright spots on defense last year. They do bring back 7 starters on both sides of the ball. He's a guy who had 98 tackles as a true freshman, 51 of which were solo. I think I'm going to start on offense, though. I'm going to switch it up real quick, Bob. You look at Elon offensively last year, a lot of it was they had to do a lot through the air. They didn't really have a run game, and that was something that hurt them a little bit. 11th in scoring offense, 14 points per game. Last in rushing offense, under 100 yards per game, but still. I think you look at what they bring back. You look at the running back position, which I think is going to be a positive. B.J. Bennett is a guy who got hurt for 4 games but still finished as the second leading rusher. Tracy Coppage, Bob, I'll throw out a little Tim McDonald stat for you. 663 rushing yards last year, a bright spot. That was the most for an Elon running back since 2009. So offensively, yes, we know they need to replace a quarterback. That's going to be a big concern for this team right now. It's probably going to be Connor Christensen, a guy who in spring ball played a lot for them. It could be another true freshman. All their quarterbacks right now on their roster are either freshmen or redshirt freshmen. That's either a good sign or a sign of some growing pains. But again, Chris Blair and that defense, I think he's going to be the so-called quarterback. You start with him at safety. John Salas is back, a linebacker. Julius Moore, you have another guy, defensive back, who's back. So again, they need to make some changes defensively, but I think offensively that's where it's going to start with the team if we want to see progression.
Coach Skrosky talked about Chris Blair being more of a leader entering his sophomore campaign. Take a listen.
It's one of the challenges to Chris. And Chris is a kid that I had the opportunity to recruit out of high school and originally up to Ball State in Indiana. When I came back to Elon, he showed the desire to come back to Elon to get closer to home. And Chris is one of our most determined and hard-working kids we have in the program. And his leadership by example is beyond reproach. I mean, you take 70 Chris Blairs every day of the week. The challenge to Chris Blair from a leadership standpoint, and I've had this conversation with him, will he become more vocal? Chris is kind of a quieter guy, but one of our jobs as coaches is to get guys out of their comfort zone. And, I see Chris developing a lot of good relationships within the program. He's a younger guy. He's only going to be a sophomore, redshirt sophomore, but he needs to take on that role as a leader, not only in example, but vocally as well.
Now, as we take a look at the Phoenix schedule, Elon stays in the state of North Carolina for the entire month of September before heading to New Hampshire for its first league road game. How important will it be for the Phoenix to get off to a strong start entering the conference season?
I think it's going to be vital. Every coach sits there, it's preseason, we need to get through the non-conference play, and then look to the schedule. But really, that is very true for Elon. You look at last year as a prime example. That's where they got their only win versus Charlotte, as mentioned before. Again, this year's schedule, it sets up to be pretty tough. At Wake is obviously a tough task, ACC foe. At Gardner-Webb, that's a team that only won 4 games last year. That's a winnable game. Home versus NCAA&T, I think that's an interesting game. NCAA&T is actually picked to win the MEAC this year. And last year, NCAA&T also played at Elon and won that game. And like you said, they get to play Towson at home, but then I looked to that CAA football schedule right after non-conference play. Towson at home, at New Hampshire, Richmond, and JMU, all in succession. I mean, that's hard for any team in the conference. So again, these non-conference games for Elon are going to be key. Only 4 of the 12 games they play, though, like you said, it interestingly is outside the state of North Carolina. We've talked about what Rich Skrosky is trying to build at Elon. We've talked about, embrace the grind and LTML. That is really something that fits well in this schedule. Think about recruiting, that it impacts recruiting when they get to stay in the state. And really, it's not a tough task for the players at all when you're not going out of state too much. So again, that kind of builds up to set up the schedule nicely. It's still a tough task for Elon, but again, that's where it likes to start in that home state of North Carolina. Rich Skrosky loves that.
Absolutely. The Phoenix opened the 2015 regular season by making a short trip to take on ACC opponent Wake Forest on Thursday, September the 3rd at 7 p.m. The game can be seen live on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app.
Also at Media Day, we sat down with a couple of Elon players to talk about their game day experience. You can check out those features right now on the Everyday is Saturday blog at cafootball.wordpress.com.
We continue our 12 teams in 12 days series tomorrow as we preview Rhode Island, where Jim Fleming is getting set for his second year as the Rams head man. For Tim McDonald, I'm Bobby Broyles. We'll see you tomorrow.